Welcome back. In this video, I'll be covering Learning Objective 7.4 for Chapter 7, Attitudes and Attitude Change for PSY 235 Social Psychology. In this section of the chapter, I know I used a lot of examples in the last video that come from advertising, but we're going to dig in a little more deeply into how advertising changes people's attitudes. Advertising is any kind of direct way of attempting to persuade people to pay attention to a product. And the whole advertising field, advertising and marketing, involve directly applying social psychology. Many of the theories, many of the practical rules of the game in advertising come directly from social psychology research. Advertising is pretty powerful, and just regardless of what you think, how resistant you are to advertising appeals, we are all very vulnerable to advertising. We are very vulnerable and susceptible to its influence. Most people are, confident that they're capable of ignoring ads, but they are much more persuadable than they think. Even when ads are super annoying and we think they're not having an influence, they actually can. I'm thinking about how many times I have been compelled to get something off the TikTok shop. And basically what they do on the TikTok algorithm is, like right now, I'm being bombarded with ads for this one brand of makeup, and I have no intention of getting it. But just the sheer number of times these influencers on TikTok are shown using this makeup product, it's very persuasive because the product looks miraculous. And while I can sit back and say, I'm not going to buy that, I have in fact fallen victim to purchasing TikTok shop products. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're absolute garbage. But it's just the sheer repetition of the products and the fact that they use spokespeople who look like me, who have my same kind of lifestyle, and they're engaged with the product, and the product seems to work really, really well. Advertising and product placement are, multi-billion-dollar industries. And, we're often very vulnerable to either people who really remind us of ourselves, or if you have really admired figures who are engaging with a product, it can have a really powerful impact on our behavior. This image comes from an ad campaign that was really pretty successful several years ago, and they really wanted to jump on this bandwagon. Girl power was a buzz phrase that was really in force during the early part of the 2000s, and this is always a feminine protection product for menstruation, and they wanted to go all in on a girl power advertising campaign. So they had these slogans like "lead like a girl," "throw like a girl," "swing like a girl," and showed a lot of really young girls, adolescents, people. These are young girls who are going to start menstruating soon, and they want to build brand loyalty when people are young. So they wanted to tap into that girl power movement that was really strong in the culture at that time. So what these advertisers are trying to do is to shift affectively, say, yeah, girl power, I throw like a girl, and that means I'm powerful, I'm strong, I'm active, I'm engaged. So what they want is to really develop a positive attitude toward being female. And part of being female is menstruation. And it's just a part, but it's not going to stop you from being powerful. So that was the nature of this particular ad campaign, and it was pretty successful at the time. Advertising is harder, as your authors put it, if it doesn't immediately grab people's emotions, or if it isn't directly relevant to their everyday life. If it's something that's just not connecting with them, like sometimes TikTok will throw me ads for tools that like electric electrical tools. I am not an electrician, and I have no desire to learn how. And TikTok suddenly got it into its head that I needed wire stripping tools. I have no interest in wire stripping at all. So it's not relevant to me, and it's going to have no impact. But if I was somebody who, did a lot of home improvement, a lot of wiring, and I was really invested in it, or if I was actually an electrician and this tool was like a multi-tool, it was supposed to save me time, I would be super on board for that ad. So you really have to pay attention to making ads personally relevant. Is when something is more personally relevant, it's going to emotionally resonate with that individual. Now, subliminal messages, as a social psychologist, I sigh heavily because this is kind of, we know what it is and it doesn't work particularly well. It definitely doesn't work the way fictional stories tell us subliminal messaging works. The image that I have on the screen here comes from an ad that was run during the 2000 presidential race, where it was George W. Bush versus Al Gore. And the Bush campaign ran an ad really arguing that the Gore prescription plan was going to be super bad for voters. And the subliminal word was flashed on the screen in microseconds, and it said rats, R-A-T-S. While it was simultaneously talking smack about the Gore prescription plan. The question is, do subliminal messages like this work? Words or pictures that aren't consciously perceived theoretically may influence attitudes and behaviors. There's no evidence, though, that subliminal messages that we encounter, like this exposure to the word at a subconscious level, rats, is going to make us hate Al Gore more. There's precious little evidence that these sorts of things can work. Like there's this long-held idea that movie theaters would implant images of popcorn subliminally throughout films to try and drive up sales of pop and popcorn and things like that. There's not there's very, 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 very little evidence that that is going to be effective. There's some evidence under carefully controlled laboratory conditions, so not in the wild. If you're in a lab, subliminal messages can be used to prime you, to make certain thoughts more accessible than they already were. That's the case. To get these kinds of effects, you have to carefully control every aspect of the situation. So if you're going to have like this Al Gore, anti-Al Gore ad, you have to control the lighting in the room. You have to have people directly seated in front of that screen. You have to have no distractions. Then they are guaranteed to actually see the subliminal stimuli when they're flashed. Even if you do all those things, there's a significant likelihood people miss it because people differ in their capacity for taking in those sorts of messages. So bottom line, there is absolutely no evidence that subliminal messages can get people to do things that go against their values, their personalities, even their desires. So it's not like brainwashing. In science fiction, subliminals are kind of, it's suggested that subliminal messaging can make people become murderers. That's just not a thing. It doesn't work. Now, there are differences in how advertising works cross-culturally. Some societies, the kinds of attitudes that people have toward products are related to differences in self-concept. Western culture is highly, highly individualistic. So we tend to value things like independence and individualism, where interdependent or collectivist cultures, like many parts of Asia, those values are much stronger. So advertising messages are going to have to play into some of those predominant kinds of cultural systems. So the kinds of attitudes that people have, as well as the advertising messages that are being sent, need to be kind of tailored to that cultural context. So you could have the same product, say an Apple computer, and the type of advertising that Americans might see may be very different from the type of advertising that, say, people in China or Japan would see, because they would have to capitalize on those collectivist versus independent kinds of messages. So in one of the studies that's described in your textbook, they noticed, just in a content analysis, American ads do tend to emphasize individuality, goals towards self-improvement, how the product will benefit you as an individual, whereas when they were looking at Korean ads, they tend to emphasize concern for others, how the product will benefit the social group, how it will make the social group look, those sorts of things. Sometimes these differences are subtle, sometimes they're very, very obvious. Basically, advertisements are going to work best if they are consistent with the dominant value system in the culture that you're looking at. That concludes my coverage of Learning Objective 7.4. Next time we'll be looking at Learning Objective 7.5, which will flip the script and we'll look at how can you resist persuasion.